Headed to the end of the regular season and getting ready for the Big 12 Conference Tournament as we chat with Coach Boynton. And, you know, it's an interesting thing, obviously, with a young team. You're at the end of the season. It's been a long journey. So how do you go about, if there's any wall that they're trying to hit, how do you steer away from that wall? It happens to everybody, I'm sure, but for the younger players, first time through it, so it's new.
Well, you got to remember two things. There is an element of physical fatigue, tiredness,
Sure.
Your weary body, aching, but it's much more mental than it is physical. And what we've got to try to get to and understand is they're much more capable of continuing to push through this mentally if they allow themselves to be in the right frame of mind. And so, practices while still preparing for the other teams and still making sure our game plan is sound, it's really about helping them understand that they're ready to play and being confident in their shooting ability, being comfortable in the game plan and scheme, but more so just the psychology of, hey, you're fresh. Everybody you're playing has been through the same type of season, and you're in really good shape. You've been working your butt off. Now it's about just making sure we balance the rest with the work to give ourselves the best chance. Because in all honesty, we'll have to win multiple games in multiple days to keep our season going next week, and that's what we'll focus on.
So obviously it was a tough start to the game against Texas Tech. This may be a ridiculously simple question, but late in the year like this, under these circumstances, is the start to the game much more important, just to get some confidence and some good feeling going?
Absolutely. And then when you factor in just the difference for young guys not having been through any of the stuff that they're going through for the first time. None of them had been part of a senior day where warm-ups were kind of disrupted the way they were. We'll go through it again at BYU, but the point still stands is we've got to get them to understand that you got to take care of the things that are within your control. And sometimes the ball doesn't go in the basket, but you still can run back in transition and communicate with your teammates. You can still communicate in your ball screen coverage so that you don't give a guy like Pop Isaac a rhythm three to start the game. And then we just got to be more committed to doing the hard things throughout the game. Making the extra pass, even when it feels like you haven't gotten a shot in a while. Running the floor so that we can create some advantages on our offensive end so we can get some easy baskets. And then playing with the continued force that has allowed us when we haven't made shots to stay in games by getting to the free throw line.
It was senior night against Texas Tech, and, a unique group, some walk-ons, some guys who obviously transferred here, but, across the board, I looked out and watched those guys go through the ceremony. That's a pretty neat group of guys.
Yeah, and I'm proud of all of them. Obviously none of them were expecting their last season to go the way it's gone. And what they've done is to continue to show up with a good attitude, eager to do their best the next day to represent this great program. We all feel a great obligation to get this thing turned. And so I'm proud of all of them, not just John Michael Wright and Jarius Hicklin and Mike Marsh, who made great contributions on the court, but our managers who've all been a part of giving us a chance to have success, and certainly the two walk-ons who've been here the longest. They've been here with us for 4 years, played with the number one pick in the draft, were part of the team that was, not allowed to play in the tournament, was part of a team that finished the first team out of the tournament. So they've seen a lot of things, and all these things, as much as we put a great emphasis on the results on the court, those things are going to allow them to be able to be a little bit more adaptable in life, able to deal with adversity in ways that maybe people who haven't been through the things that they've been through will be able to deal with as they move forward. And they certainly will be really successful people, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of their lives move forward and seeing how I can be a part of it with them.
We're obviously not done yet, but obviously we're at the end, one way or the other. I mean, obviously we're in the final 2 or 3 weeks of the season, regardless of what happens. What have you learned this year? What's been some things that are going to stick with you because of how this season has gone?
Yeah, I mean, just the reality of the changing of the sport. We try to stick with our core principles of developing young people and giving them a chance to learn through the games how to win. And I just don't know if you can do that anymore. Not that you don't recruit high school kids, but there's got to be probably a slant toward experience, to give yourself the best chance in a league like this that's as experienced as any, with the coaching, with the road environments, the things that you're going to not be able to control, not going to have time to teach a bunch of young guys on the fly. I looked out there the other day. We had 4 freshmen and a sophomore on the floor at one point in the game. just not a great recipe, honestly, for success in college athletics in 2024. So, it was a tough way to learn it, but certainly that my eyes are wide open to making sure we got experienced guys at each spot and making sure if they're young guys who have a sense of their responsibility to the older guys, so that they can give those older guys the best chance to go out with a positive vibe.
I don't want to dwell on this, but it's interesting because you've always been so good at recruiting and developing relationships. That's always been a strength of yours. And now with the changes, I compare it to like golf. Mm-hmm. Someone who's a really good putter, and then all of a sudden they say, putting doesn't exist anymore. You just hit drivers and irons, and there's no more putting in golf. For you, it's been sort of the same thing. You've been so good at building relationships. That doesn't change, but one of the things that's been your strength, obviously probably not as important as it used to be, which, again, not to dwell on it, but it's really
a reality. It's a reality of the industry. And maybe it changes once we kind of all get accustomed to, seeing how the different dynamics with the portal and NIL kind of converging here plays out and changes over the course of time with universities maybe taking more charge of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it kind of gets back to a normalcy state. But the reality is the COVID year will go away after next year. Mm-hmm. That'll help kind of normalize to a certain degree the age of college basketball, college athletics. But the reality is you're right. Relationships will still be important, but in terms of how you get kids, it's going to be kind of more speed dating than relationship building over time. And you'll have to learn those kids while they're in your program and develop those relationships as they're a part of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
So BYU, the regular season finale, you had a great win against them here. Do you feel like that's a good matchup in terms of personnel?
I really do. The way they play actually plays to what we kind of do well against in terms of taking away three-point shooting. They're not a team that just kind of pounds away at you in the paint, which a lot of the other teams in our league do. They don't necessarily not defend, but they don't defend the way some of the other teams in our league do, which taking you out of offense and really trying to force turnovers. I think they only forced like 5 turnovers against Iowa State last night in their game in Ames. They don't usually turn it over, and they had a high number of turnovers, but they're a team that wants to beat you at the three-point line. They have multiple guys who are capable of hitting 5 or 6 threes, and it's the one thing that we really, really have done a pretty good job of defending most of the season, which is the three-point line.
So if this team's going to go on a run at the end, what are a couple of things that this team could do to make that happen?
Well, making shots is the first. It's probably the easiest, most simple way to get yourself going. We dealt with the Oregon State team a couple of years ago that got hot at this time of year, made a run in their conference tournament all the way to the Elite Eight. And so making shots is one thing, but staying confident and keeping, again, we talked about at the beginning, the frame of mind that you don't want it to be over. Sometimes people get to the end of the season, they're like, man, it's been a long year, and they're ready to kind of just get to the offseason so that they can reset things. Well, we can't think about that at all. We've got to try to maximize what we can do for John Michael Wright and Jarius Hicklin and Mike Marsh, because who knows what their future holds from a basketball standpoint, but we know they have right now.
It's the Cowboys and BYU, and then off to the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. Thanks for watching.